Good morning and welcome. Welcome, dear friends. Welcome to our spiritual home, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tarpon Springs. We're so glad to have you with us today. My name is Barbara Rosen, and I serve on our Board of Trustees and am serving as your worship associate today. We are a church of many welcomes, and we offer a warm welcome to all of you. This is a liberal community for all ages, promoting spiritual growth, social justice, and the arts. As such, ours is an active church, and everyone is invited to participate in any of our activities. To learn more about events, our church calendar is on our website, uutarpon.org, or we'd be happy to talk with you during the coffee hour. Our children are with us today during the beginning of the service at this time, and we have faith formation programming available with our gifted leader, Jamie Cruz. Children gather for their time together with her after the story. If you'd like more information about our programming, please contact Reverend Christina or see Jamie after the service. For those present with us in the building, we have connection cards available in the pews near the hymnals. If you fill one out and put it in the offering plate or give it to one of our greeters, we will be able to keep in touch with you. If you're watching us on Zoom, you can send us an email at membership@uutarpon.org to get connected. There are also small cards to write any joys and concerns that you would like to share with us if you prefer to do it in writing. We're delighted to have Dr. Jeff Nall leading the service today. Jeffrey Nall, Ph.D., teaches philosophy and humanities courses for Indian River State College and the University of Central Florida. Nall also teaches courses in Florida Atlantic University's Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies Department. He recently began a Substack newsletter and a podcast, which can be found at jeffreynall.substack.com. Music is provided today by our music director, Bonnie Whitehurst. Again, welcome. Our opening words today, Toward a Place of Wholeness, from Blue Notes, an anthology of love, justice, and liberation. Words by Viola Abbott. We are Unitarian Universalists. When we lift up our 7 principles, some of us think of them as a form of theology, but they are more important to our collective than that. They do not tell us what we should believe. They tell us how we should be. They tell us how we should act in the larger world with each other. We are brought here today by the truth that Unitarian Universalism has shifted course to move toward a place of wholeness, a place that perhaps has never existed for us as a denomination. It has been a long and sometimes unforgiving road to today. But we are here today because we are mindful of the past and because we have hope for the future. We want the practice of this faith to be fulfilling manifestation of its promise. Open your hearts, seek new ways of understanding. Come, let us worship together.
We light our chalice with these words from Rebecca Savage. May it melt away the tethers that uphold whiteness in our midst. May it spark in us a spirit of humility. May it ignite in us radical love that transforms our energy into purposeful action. This is a chalice of audacious hope. This chalice shines a light onto our shared past, signaling our intention to listen deeply, reflect wisely, and move boldly towards our highest ideals.
Hello all, my name is Laura Rodriguez and I am a member of UU Tarpon. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a Latina woman in her late 30s. I have long curly brown hair parted on the side with dark brown eyes, and I am wearing blue jeans with a black shirt. I am up here with my daughter Luna. She is a 7-year-old girl, also with long wavy brown hair parted in the middle with coffee brown eyes, which are my favorite, and wearing blue jeans with a pink shirt. I was invited here to share with you today on the topic of why am I here and why do I give? I'll start by saying that my favorite part about this community is that it's non-dogmatic and very accepting. It does not force its varied beliefs onto you or anyone, but rather just focuses on our common values, on how to be just a decent human being. And it is very important for me that my daughter learns that you do not need to be a member of a specific religion or creed or believe in any deity to do good by others. You see, for most of my early years and as a young adult, I was a practicing Catholic. But as I completed university, I became disenchanted with the idea of religion and its use by those in power as a means to control the masses or public opinion. I moved to the Tampa Bay area back in 2009, and for most of that time, I felt lost and disconnected in this community. I missed and still do miss home, back home Puerto Rico, and nothing quite compares to it. And I also felt so very different from everybody else here. That sense of being the other made it very hard for me to feel at home. Thankfully, in 2016, I started working with the Florida Center for Inclusive Communities at the University of South Florida, and it was there that I found my professional purpose and really bonded with the USF community. I started feeling more settled here. But I was still lacking that spiritual home where I could be 100% my authentic, questioning self. No expectations, no rules, just being. Then along came 2020, and that was a time in my life of profound self-reflection and learning the value of what truly matters. My daughter Luna must have felt that energy in our home because even she started asking questions about God, the universe, and spiritual communities. I heard about Unitarian Universalism before, and I even visited a church community in Odessa, but it didn't feel quite right. When my daughter Luna kept asking and asking, I searched and found UU Tarpon and decided to give UU another try. What called me into UU Tarpon was how welcoming even the website seemed to be to what others may consider outcasts. I thought to myself, if that is where the free thinkers are called to, then that's where I want to be. And the non-pressure once I arrived here provided me with the space to get involved at my own pace. Also, all the fawning over Luna and the excitement about having children around really helped cement the thinking that we were in the right place for us. I hope to continue slowly but surely to get more and more involved with this community. And I still feel like a newbie many times, but I also feel very, very valued. I want to make sure that places like this continue to exist for others that may come later. So, I hope to remain a member for years to come and lend my talent and resources to the growth of this beautiful and welcoming community. And it's also, for me, a much-needed spiritual home for me and for those who are looking for free and responsible search for the truth and meaning in an ever-changing, chaotic world. Thank you.
And let us sing Spirit of Life. Spirit of life, come unto me, sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion, blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice, roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Our story today is Skin Again by Bell Hooks, illustrated by Chris Rascheka. The skin I'm in. Is just a covering. It cannot tell my story. The skin I'm in is just a covering. If you want to know who I am, you have got to come inside and open your heart way wide. The skin I'm in looks good to me. It will let you know one small way to trace my identity. But then again, the skin I'm in will always just be a covering. It cannot tell my story. If you want to know who I am, you have got to come inside. Be with me inside the me of me, all made up of stories, present, past, and future. Some true to life, and others all the fun and fantasy, all the way I imagine me. You can find all about me coming close and letting go of who you might think I am. Before you come inside and let me be real, and you become real to me. All real then in that place where skin again is one small way to see me, but not real enough to be all. The me of me or the you of you, for all we are inside, must make up the real history, real dreams, and all the stuff we hope for when we can all be real. Together on the inside. Now is the time in our service where we take our offering for the work and welfare of this church. Ours is a free faith which must sustain itself financially. Please go to our website, uutarpon.org, and click the donate button, or you may mail your offering to the church at 57 Reed Street, Tarpon Springs, Florida, 34689. For those of you who are with us in person in the sanctuary, place your offering in the offering plates as they are passed. Our reading today, these words are from Maya Wade Harper from Blue Notes. Being UU in black means watching as they put up the BLM sign and knowing the fight has hardly started. It means being coined a token and lifted up while you do all the work. Means late nights and meetings, sermons that you hope they will hear. Means answering questions that you don't want to answer and hoping it will be enough. It means asking for more diversity, but not appropriation. It means backlash and tight smiles and exhaustion. But being UU in black also means raising our hands and voting for justice. While friendships warm my heart, it means feeling right at home in those walls and knowing that these people understand. Means education and singing and healing and marching in the cold together. It means knowing your dream is shared by others and you can accomplish it together. Means chalices, rituals, and sacred spaces, feeling welcome and loved and holy. This means supporting values that support my people's lives. It means black spaces and spending time healing with those who look like me. It means knowing inside that you belong, even if sometimes it is so hard and tiring. I am here to stay. And may we now have a moment of silence.
Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you, won't you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you, won't you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony.
And may we now introduce Jeff Nall. Thank you.
So I am a 43-year-old man from South Florida. I'm an inch under 6 foot, didn't quite make it there, with dark brown eyes, brown hair, and a bit of a beard and a mustache going on. So on December 15th, 2021, the world lost one of the great public intellectuals of our day, Bell Hooks. Many who commented on her passing understandably focused on her invaluable contribution to understanding the complexities of race and gender. These aspects of her work do indeed merit considerable focused attention, yet there are some other less discussed elements of her work that I think also merit attention around matters such as class exploitation and the price that men pay for their very real male privilege in a patriarchal society, and also things like what it means to genuinely think critically and uphold the fundamental principles of a democratic society, including authentic freedom of expression. So I was first introduced to bell hooks and her work in my graduate studies in women's studies, in particular at Florida Atlantic University. I think this is way too late in the game. And at the time, I was a very recalcitrant scholar who was more interested in engaging with the wider general public than adopting certain in-group academic speak that is very alienating to the vast majority of people who might even, stomach to try to understand or hear any of this stuff. And bell hooks' work, as it often does for many of its readers, really spoke to me because it was direct, it was concise, it was profound, and just as important as all that was, it revealed an author who was interested in the world, who didn't try to hide her interest in making the world a better place. In a word, bell hooks cared about what she was writing about, and she made no attempt to disguise that fundamental humanistic concern that motivated her scholarship. Dominant culture has a tendency to paint a false notion of objectivity that's defined as detachment, valueless studies of whatever the subject happens to be. And as the pioneering social theorist Erich Fromm put it in his 1947 book, Man for Himself, objectivity is not, quote, synonymous with detachment, with the absence of interest and care. He writes, how can one penetrate the veiling surface of things to their causes and relationships if one does not have an interest that is vital and sufficiently impelling for so laborious a task? And finally, he says, objectivity does not mean detachment. It means respect. That is, the ability not to distort and to falsify things, persons, and oneself. There hardly has been any significant discovery or insight, he says, which has not been prompted by an interest of the thinker. In fact, without interests, thinking would become sterile and pointless. What matters is not whether or not there is an interest, but what kind of interest there is and what its relationship to the truth will be, end quote. Now, I reference Erich Fromm here because not only was he a thinker who remains fresh, prescient, and accessible, as well as insightful, but also because he is one of those thinkers that bell hooks went to again and again to draw and develop many of her own great insights. And it's through hooks I was actually introduced to this, I think, very underappreciated and perspicacious social theorist. Now, bell hooks, against academic trends, used plain language. My students love reading bell hooks because you can actually read her. That's always helpful. She also did something very daring. She spoke in the first person. She talked about some personal experiences. And she took popular culture very seriously. And she showed a genuine interest, as I said, in her work and its impact on the people who are reading it. Many of her readers don't agree with everything she argues, and I'm telling you that there's no one in this room, not a single person, who will come out unscathed in her criticisms. But there's no one who reads bell hooks and doesn't have a sense of the good faith that motivates her work, and she's willing to be self-critical as well. Her work is motivated by compassion and justice, not tenure, accolades, and certainly not money. And this is clear from the fact that, as I said, almost no one survives her very authentic intersectional analysis. She refused to give us easy enemies, but instead she took very bold positions, often implicating, as I say, most of her readers, most of her friends, as a matter of fact. I mean, it turns out that dinners were a little rough with bell hooks, because she told you what she was thinking. Influential black feminist legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw, after her passing, told the New York Times that bell hooks had this rare written candor where, quote, she was utterly courageous in terms of putting on paper thoughts that many of us have made, essentially have had in private, but, have the good sense to keep off of paper. Hooks' courage was, and this is, I think, one of the most important things that one can understand about bell hooks, that her courage was buoyed by an ethic of love that was the foundation for all of the other stuff. Everything else is secondary to a fundamental ethic of love. Her aim was social transformation rather than personal gain, and flattering her readers or those in power. And the very reason she chose not to capitalize her name, which is a little confusing for people on spell check, was to prioritize the substance of her ideas over her individual identity. And it was also an homage to her grandmother. The accessibility and the relatability of Hooks' writing reflects her lifelong concern for the lives of everyday people, something that also resonated with me. The whole of the human family. Hooks is widely known as a feminist and as an anti-racist thinker, which she is, but she wasn't just any kind of feminist. Hooks defined feminism, quote, as a movement to end sexism, sexist exploitation, and oppression, end quote. Just as not all Christians hold precisely the same beliefs, same goes with feminists. Divisions have always existed among feminists in terms of strategy and also the larger vision of what a just world ought to look like if we can achieve it. Some feminists have sought to reform the dominant society to create space and opportunity for women to join men in their existing positions of power and authority within the existing structures of society, minus the sexism against women. But following the path of radical feminists, Bell Hooks viewed the foundations of patriarchal culture as itself part of the problem. She believed that male supremacy was rooted in an amorphous and ever-changing ideology of human inequality and notions of superiority. Superiority of men? Yes. Superiority of Europeans? Yes. Superiority of military might over those with less? Yes. Superiority over those with wealth? Superiority of those with heterosexual privilege and so forth. So she wrote, reformist thinkers choose to emphasize gender equality. She wrote in her book, Feminism is for Everybody. Revolutionary thinkers, she went on to say, did not want to simply alter the existing system so that women would have more rights. We wanted to transform that system to bring an end to patriarchy and sexism itself, end quote. As a member of this revolutionary wing of feminist thought, Bell Hooks believed we needed to speak candidly about the interconnectedness of white supremacy, patriarchy, imperialism, and capitalistic exploitation. And in this respect, she's in some good company. She shared Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's diagnosis of America's spiritual sickness as a triplet of evils: racism, economic exploitation, and the one that most of us like to leave out, imperialism, militarism. But Hooks also had some additional insights that King was a little bit lacking. The radical insight of radical feminism filled in the crucial gap, recognizing the role that patriarchal masculinity had played in feeding into that triplet of evils. Hooks's feminism was egalitarian, and it sought to address pain and suffering wherever she observed it. She didn't choose one single category of human existence to research and write about and empathize with. She saw the whole of the human family as part of her family. She recognized there were fundamental differences in our social identities and the privileges they afforded us and the disadvantages they sometimes were attached to. But that did not stop her ability to recognize a fundamental common humanity that we all shared. She refused reductive analysis of oppression, which is sometimes still today embraced. Oversimplification. She boldly challenged us to see how ideologies and practices of dominance work together to produce interlocking injustices. And a video that she was part of making in 1997, you can find clips of it online for free, which is called Cultural Criticism and Transformation. She said the following. She says, I began to use the phrase in my work, imperialist, white, supremacist, capitalist patriarchy. Say that 10 times fast. We won't practice it now, but when I come back, if you invite me back, we'll see how you're progressing there. Because I wanted to have some language that would actually remind us continually of the interlocking systems of domination that define our reality, and not to just have one be like, gender is the important issue. End of discussion. Or race is the important issue, end of discussion. She said, but for me, the use of that particular jargonistic phrase was a sort of shortcut way of saying all of these things are functioning simultaneously at all times in our lives. And if you choose one to focus on, it'd be like a harp with one string, a guitar with one string, a chorus with one voice. Be leaving out a whole lot of the complexity that you need to really resolve the issue. To foster a truly caring, just society, we would need to go to the roots of deep-seated problems, and this would require, according to bell hooks, radical thought, a lot of it. Radical action without radical thought may be a lot of wasted time, like a vacation to nowhere that you're well planned for except for choosing a destination. Radical thought, and then radical action. Hooks was a vital force in expanding the depth and scope of feminist consciousness. When she was just 19, she wrote the book, Ain't I a Woman? Black Women and Feminism, written in 1981. Now, this was an homage to Sojourner Truth and a critical assessment of white feminists' racist beliefs and alliances, and the lingering effects of racial stereotypes on black women. In her book that she wrote a few years later called Feminist Theory from Margin to Center, she explored the ways in which black women's experiences and insights were pushed to the margins of the very feminist movement that ostensibly saw itself as being purposed to advance women's rights. And yet there were these members of this women's community that were being pushed to the side. So she wrote the following. Much feminist theory emerges from privileged women who live at the center, whose perspectives on reality rarely include knowledge and awareness of the lives of women and men who live in the margin. As a consequence, feminist theory lacks wholeness, she writes in 1984. It lacks wholeness, lacks the broad analysis that could encompass a variety of human experiences. Although feminist theorists are aware of the need to develop ideas and analysis that encompass a large number of experiences, she wrote, that serve to unify rather than to polarize, such theory is complex and slow in formation. At its most visionary, she tells us, it will emerge from individuals who have both knowledge of the margin and the center. Got to have a lot of voices in the chorus if you really want to generate knowledge and understanding and build solidarity, which you need as well. Reflecting on her experience raising the problem of racism among feminism as a young woman, she recollected 16 years later in Feminism is for Everybody, she said, in those days, white women who were unwilling to face the reality of racism and racial difference accused us of being traitors by introducing race. Wrongly, they saw us as deflecting focus away from gender. Our intent was not to diminish this vision of sisterhood. Instead, it was to put in place a concrete politics of solidarity that would make genuine sisterhood possible. We knew that there could be no real sisterhood between white women and women of color if white women were not able to divest of white supremacy, if the feminist movement were not fundamentally anti-racist, she put it. Now, we can credit bell hooks in part with helping to change the cultural landscape that many of us are. I mean, if we're being honest, at least some of us, I'll claim myself, a bit of a freeloader. Didn't really do much of the heavy lifting in the early feminist movement. Where was I? Wasn't born, that's partial to excuse. But then again, really didn't kind of get, fully up on what was happening until, later in my young adulthood life. But so in many ways, we have benefited from a whole lot of work that other people have done for us, myself most certainly. And bell hooks has done a whole lot of heavy lifting for us when it comes to building our consciousness of racism. But what is perhaps less well known is that bell hooks followed Reverend Dr. King in concentrating on class oppression as a central subject of concern in the last years of her life. Hooks, like King, was comparably a lot less successful in convincing the broader society of the centrality of economic class and understanding systems of human oppression. Now, I'm not going to claim that corporate America is really as into Black Lives Matter as the banners on their websites like Amazon really are. But I don't think you're going to see an Amazon banner supporting Christopher Smalls, Black New Yorker, who's organizing unions for Amazon. I don't think you're ever going to get, that they support unions. They can at least pay lip service to the Black Lives Matter movement. They won't even pay lip service to genuine economic equality, which would, of course, dramatically benefit those who are the poorest in our society, which are often people of color. But there are plenty of poor white people as well. In fact, there's more poor white people because there's just more white people, generally. We don't recognize that. We don't think about that. We don't talk about that. Bell Hooks does, because she's an intersectional thinker who understands you cannot reduce someone to a single category of their identity and pretend that you have an understanding of them, let alone the society in which you live. Hooks maintained that without understanding the plight, concerns, and experiences of poor people, our knowledge, our social analyses would be impoverished, our political projects would fail, and our causes of social justice would be half-measured. Feminism of the 1970s was not only troubled by its ethnic blind spots, but also its class bias. While white women with comparative privilege spoke of the desire, Betty Friedan, for example, to work outside of the home, there were many poor women who were like, work out of the home? We're already doing that. There were a lot of women of privilege who could have worked out of the home. Just the jobs would have been terrible. The conditions would have been exploitative and terrible. And they didn't want that. They wanted a more privileged, a more dignified work experience. And who could blame them? As Hooks writes in Feminism is for Everybody, it was not gender discrimination or sexist oppression that kept privileged women of all races from working outside the home. It was the fact that the jobs would have been available to them, would have been the same low-paid, quote-unquote, unskilled labor open to all working women. Elite groups of highly educated females stayed home rather than do the type of work that large numbers of lower middle-class women and working-class women were doing. And what's interesting here is that it was lesbian women, in particular, who were among the first to bring the issue of class to the forefront of the feminist movement for reasons that are pretty clear. In embracing female partners and trying to live lives of integrity and authenticity, these women compounded the experience and social inequality of being women with also being women who were not in romantic relationships with men who would boost their income and their economic power so that they were often economically disadvantaged. And it was lesbian women who really brought this issue of class to the forefront. Class-based analyses fail us, of course, when they don't account for the unique and interlocking harms of sexism, and homophobia and racism, when we simply reduce understanding oppression and equality to just economic inequality, we fail to recognize how these other aspects of human identity also play a role. But the reverse is true as well. There are no easy, oversimplified, bumper sticker solutions. Analyses that leave out class, Hook argued, were incomplete. This is what she said about it. She says, class matters. We don't talk about class. We don't identify ourselves in our particular economic class. In fact, we don't talk about how much money we make. We don't say, well, my income bracket is this. And our preambles, I perhaps should have started that way, but I had enough good sense to know that's not the polite thing to do. But as a matter of fact, it would be a really informative exercise, wouldn't it? This one, $100,000 a year, that sounds like 3 incomes to me, because somebody else making $30,000. That's very different life experiences. But those are things we don't politely talk about. And why? She says, class matters. Race and gender can be used as screens to deflect attention. This is bell hooks. Race and gender can be used as screens to deflect attention away from the harsh realities class politics exposes. We can actually use race and gender to obscure these economic inequalities that we'd rather not talk about. She warned us that the very centers of power are often willing to lean into the condemnation of racism and sexism when they want to divert attention from economic exploitation, inequalities, and union busting and others. She wrote, clearly, just when we should all be paying attention to class, using race and gender to understand and explain its new dimensions, society, even our own government, says, let's talk about race and racial injustice. It is impossible, she said, to talk meaningfully about ending racism without talking about class. Let us not be duped. I would say that if we truly have an interest in honoring this remarkable human being who's done so much to raise the consciousness of feminist thought, we might begin by not being duped, by recognizing that leaving out the class dimensions of our life experiences only further entrenches those very things we seek to do something about. I'll say one last thing about bell hooks that I'd like to bring to your attention, which is that she believed in the power of words and communication. She believed we needed to name the ideology and practice that systematically denigrates and oppresses women, and that name is patriarchy. In her book, The Will to Change, Men, Love, and Masculinity, she says one of the most important feminist examinations, or rather, I would say it is one of the most important feminist examinations of men and masculinity. She defined patriarchy as a political social system that insists that males are inherently dominating, superior to everything and everyone deemed weak, especially females, and endowed with the right to dominate and rule over the weak, to maintain the dominance through various forms of psychological terrorism and violence. Now that sounds harsh, sounds a little extreme. You use a phrase like psychological terrorism and violence. As somebody who teaches in this field and has the opportunity to read about people's experiences, lots of them, if we were just to sample and have conversations with a small handful of the women in our lives, and to discover how few women can live out their childhood into old age without having had their most fundamental bodily integrity assaulted by those who are the closest to them, the people that they love and also feel feelings of fear and sometimes hatred. This is not hyperbole, psychological terrorism, until we can talk to 100 women and have the vast majority of them live through their childhood and young adulthood and into old age, having never been subjected to that kind of violation. Then we need to actually meditate on the actual truth of these words. But here's the interesting thing about bell hooks, again, always challenging us to not just have easy answers. Her criticism of the destructiveness of patriarchal masculinity did not devolve into writing off men. She did not let men get away with failing to acknowledge their male privilege. Male privilege is a sociological reality. But like few other authors have done, bell hooks recognize that patriarchal privilege comes at an enormous cost to men. As anyone who understands patriarchal culture will realize, how else to understand the fact that boys and men aged 15 to 45, that the third leading killer of those boys, it's not terrorism, it's not COVID, it's not mass shootings, it's themselves. The third leading killer of boys and men 15 to 45 is themselves. So if we are to have a true sense of male privilege, we will have to account for the various dimensions of that privilege. She wrote the following. She put it this way: patriarchy is the single most life-threatening social disease. Now you might fill in the gap there and say, well, against women. She says patriarchy is the single most life-threatening social disease assaulting the male body and spirit in our nation. The vast majority of people who die on the job are men. A large majority of people who die as a result of homicides are men. The people who take their life more successfully are men. If that's male privilege, I'm not sure how many of us really want it. But does it come with privilege? It most certainly does when it comes to income, when it comes to expectations, when it comes to social relations and domestic responsibilities. There are a host of those privileges. But are we to presume that people who are taking their life at remarkable rates and who, by the way, die significantly younger, several years, about 6-7 years on average, before women, often having to do with lifestyle choices, are we really to understand them as perfectly privileged? Bell Hooks says absolutely not. And so with this, what I will close by saying is that for Bell Hooks, the very essence of her political project was a recognition that love needs to be at the center of our projects. So love is at the center of our projects, then we will have knowledge of the entire human family. We will not write people off. We will not oversimplify them. We will not dehumanizingly stereotype them as women or as men or as white people or as black people or as gay people or straight people and so forth. Our society faces many problems at present, I'm sure you know. Not least of which is the question of whether or not so much, the God is dead question, but I would say the most important question is whether or not love is dead. Is love alive or dead in our political projects? Are they just gamesmanship? Is it just point scoring? Are we just trying to posture and prop ourselves up on other people? Too many of our political leaders and so-called public figures speak in pure instrumentalized calculations. Who's winning, who's losing? What is the point score on the board? Love is not honored as the elemental basis of our personal and political projects. At best, it is allowed to fall by the wayside. At worst, it is treated as a triviality or a frivolous distraction. Hooks, like King and Fromm before her, challenges us to recognize the love of humanity, the honoring of human dignity as the inspiring impetus for combating human oppression, as a foundational principle for living a good and true life. If such thinking is true, then it is not enough, as Reverend King once remarked, to fling a coin to a beggar. We must infuse our political and social projects with an uncompromising love of our fellow human beings, including those we believe are most misguided, those that might even be counted as our enemy, especially when so many of them have literally been in our own families. If Bell Hooks, I would say, teaches us anything, it is the necessity of living lives of love and integrity, a love that extends beyond the self, beyond the family, and beyond the friends, but also to the entirety of the human family.
And we have a hymn right now, number 1015 in this teal book. I know I can. 1015.
Though
days be dark with storms, and burdens weigh my heart, though troubles wait at every turn, I know I can go on. When sorrow heals my soul, and burdens make me strong, when troubles wait at every turn, I know I can go on. My sister in my heart, my brother in my soul, though troubles wait at every turn, I know I can go on. And though the journey is long, destination is near. When troubles wait at every turn, I know I can go on. So brothers, take my hand, and sisters, sing my song. When hope awaits at every turn, I know we will go on.
Our closing words today, Only Begun by William G. Sinkford. Spirit of life and love, dear God of all nations, there is so much work to do. We have only begun to imagine justice and mercy. Help us hold fast to our vision of what we can be. May we see the hope in our history and find the courage and the voice to work for that constant rebirth. That is our dream.
Around comes the autumn, the swallows are leaving, the year is unweaving her garments of red. Out of its hiding the winter is riding, so nature lies still and pretends to be dead. Aspen and you will be quivering and bare. What will we do? We'll be shivering the year. With around will come Christmas, the feast of the stranger. The beasts in the manger will fall on their knees. Green in in the cloister and green on the altar, the promise that green will return to the trees. Aspen and yew will be quivering and bare. What will we do? We'll be shivering the air. With a round will come Christmas, the feast of the stranger. The beasts in the manger will fall on their knees. Green in the cloister and green on the altar, a promise that green will return to the trees. Return to the trees.
We hope that you found meaning in today's service, and thank you to all who bring it to us. Thank you. We close with these words from Marjorie Killam. We extinguish this chalice flame, daring to carry forward the vision of this free faith, that freedom, reason, and justice will one day prevail in this nation and across the earth. And Jean will bring us announcements.